Us, YouTube, it's time to finally finish off these Gunvolt Chronicles. Did I already make that joke? Don't worry, it'll come back later. Gunvolt 3 is finally released, and after 2 spin-off games at that. So, is it time for Gunvolt's return to form? No, not in the slightest. But stick around to find out why. Last time on Azure's striker Gunvolt, Gunvolt 2, our hero Gunvolt and anti-hero Copen managed to save the latter's little sister as she fused with Joel, Gunvolt's companion, to regain her psychic Septima powers, but this caused her to lose her memories of both boys. Having nothing left to fight for, the two boys go their separate ways, leaving the girl to live out a normal life. But behind the scenes, Copen's maid Nori and Gunvolt's communication assistant Xiao had made a deal to seal the girl's psychic abilities inside a locket to keep them out of the hands of Gunvolt or any other ability-holding adept for fear of them gaining too much power. You catch all of that? Good, forget about it, none of that matters. We open up on a mysterious girl looking down on the Sumeragi Futures Institute. She works with the group Shadow Yakumo that has ties with Sumeragi by being the ones that make their glaives, specially made swords that contain a person's Septima, their psychic abilities, and are able to hold them back. It's also their job to, big quotation marks here, look after them. It's their battle priestess's job, Kirin, to infiltrate their building and find out what they're hiding this time. As we get started with our opening stage, we find out that Kirin plays like a mixture of Gunvolt and both versions of Copen. She has an actual sword this time, and her basic attacks are much faster and longer reaching than Copen's were in X2. Like Gunvolt, she attacks her opponents, but unlike his darts, her talismans reduce their health and boost your attack. If I had to put it into fighting game terms, she gives her opponents gray health and you attack them to cash it out. Her other ability, which only activates after the starter level, is her Arc Chain. After tagging an opponent, she can warp towards them for an attack. Depending on if you press the right or left on the D-pad, she will warp in front or behind them. Honestly, you only mostly have to worry about getting behind them, because you'll generally be in front of them with just a normal tap. But we can get into more detail about that later. As we reach the end of the level, we run into a similar but different situation from the first game. Man, this guy's pompous too. Anyway, we run into this giant monster. Dragon? After we beat it, they turn into Gunvolt. It seems that his powers suddenly went out of control one day, and with no choice he surrendered himself to Sumeragi. In the meantime, they siphoned off his access energy to power the country, but that energy contained dragon radiation. It causes other Septimal powers to go out of control just like his did. It's now up to him and Kirin to hunt down the out-of-control adepts, except for one thing. Gunvolt turned into a dog. You start off with one stage to start from. It's a tutorial, it's fine. You start off with 4 stages to choose from: a city being terrorized on Christmas night, an arcade city based on Kowloon, a shipping facility next to the ocean, and a high-rise, high-tech temple. After being in the post-apocalypse twice in the past 2 games, it's nice to get back to some futuristic cityscapes. However, you are forced to pick the Christmas stage first, because it serves as a tutorial for your new arc chain, and for Gunvolt as a whole. Gunvolt isn't his own character in this game, he's more like a super mode for Kirin. You have an energy meter next to your health bar that fills up as you attack. Once you reach 100%, you hold down ZL or ZR, and you'll transform into Gunvolt. He's practically in his Anthem powered up form from the previous games, so that means he has infinite dashing and air jumps. You attack the same way by tagging and using your flash field, but this time your flash field will protect you when it's not activated, much like Copen's used to work. Speaking of Copen, Gunvolt also stole his tag dash as well. You dash into enemies and tag them, but Gunvolt will dash through them to do damage. He can also use the arc chain, but his spits out lightning that crosses the screen, and unlike Kirin's talismans, his tags always stays active, so he pretty much shreds through bosses' health. His meter is also a timer that naturally runs out, but you do have an ability to charge to keep it steady while it's standing still. It runs out a little faster by attacking, and it runs out a lot more when you take damage and use Pervasion. However, depending on how high your percentage is when you summon him, he'll have a different special move to finish off enemies, but Kirin doesn't heal while he's out, so you do have to be careful about when you run out of his meter. Anthem makes a return because it has to, I guess. Who cares about what happened in the last game? The writers clearly don't. Anyway, when Kirin dies, there's a chance that the Muse, Morpho, will revive her, but they will return as an even more powerful Gunvolt until you reach the gate for the next area, or beat the boss. I don't know when you died. We battle through these areas and slowly defeat our bosses and add more people to our team. BB, Shiron, Apollo, and Cayman join our little dragon hunting squad, and we work together with Sumeragi to clear up this crisis. This only comes about because unlike Child Soldier Gunvolt over there, Kirin doesn't kill her enemies. An interesting character trait, but mostly just a plot device. Either way, with the harem of cliché boys behind us, we can now tackle anything that comes our way. Like a set of missiles heading straight for Japan. With the help of Shiron's tracking and Gunvolt's OP broken powers, he teleports them to the missiles to stop the threat head on. There we find the mastermind behind the attack, Zed Omega. Zed. They never say the Omega part out loud, or even reference it. I don't know why it's there. He's an adept whose power of nuclear fusion could rival even Gunvolt's electricity. He's also had a hand in awakening the dragons with his Muse-like partner who's also been keeping an eye on us. He tells us that his organization, Atoms, has arrived in Japan and that these unarmed missiles were just a means of transportation to get past the country's barrier. After a quick fight, he departs, and our only clue on their location is that his people have started searching for the original items on which the glaives were based, the binding brands. Trust me when I say that the story makes this sound better than I'm presenting it, but it's not that much better. So, now that we have more stages and 4 more bosses to tackle, how about we talk about home base? You'll have all of your old amenities that have always been there, like the chat function that lets you talk to your gathered party members. You can check your special skills. They don't change, so maybe some DLC will switch it out like they did with X2. I wouldn't know, I didn't buy that. I'm still waiting for my physical release. The game manual is also still here, lets you understand all of the game mechanics and buttons and what they do. You can manually save, even though the game does still have autosaving. Options are back and you can change all of your buttons once again, or maybe you want to change if your command dash works. The sound options have also returned. They're the same as last time. It's annoying still. Story mode options return once again. You can turn the story mode off completely. You can have your voices on and off completely and still have the text. You can change the window transparency and the portrait transparency. I'd say they're better than ever this time, and it's especially helped by the fact that this has a fully English voice cast. So you can really turn off the portraits and just get the whole experience, or turn off everything and still get it. As for our last 2 options, they are another game mechanic. Gunvolt can create physical illusions of people he's met before. Combined with Kirin's talismans, they can hold a form long enough to be used, or at the very least, that's the in-game story explanation. It's why Morpho is back. As for a gameplay aspect, they both come in 2 types, active and passive. Active pulses range from doing damage, to shielding, or even healing. Kieran has to activate these during battle, and they recharge over time. Passive ones are, as they say on the tin, always active. They range from attack buffs, extra jumps, defense, healing over time, and extra score. They all cover a wide range of abilities. You can equip 4 active ones at a time. As for passive ones, you are only able to equip 1 at the start, but with leveling up, you unlock more slots. There's also an in-game music slot for idle songs, and you can block out the ones that you don't want to play. That seems backwards, but sure, why not? You get these image pulses by finding tokens during the levels. The first one's free, but you have to find the rest in pairs. You get the bottom one first and the top one second so you can keep track of when you've missed one, but only when you've found one because the indicator disappears for some dumb reason. After you've completed a level and collected your tokens, you get a flashy gacha-like screen and you get a random assortment of passive and active abilities. Each level has their own pulls, and when you pull a double you get cash back depending on the rarity, which there are only 2 of, 1 star and 3 stars. You use that cash to level up your 3-star rarity image pulses to power them up more. A 3-star image pulse will start off worse than a 1-star, but you level them up 3 times to get a better result. Think of 1 stars as a free trial to what you want to get. But with that out of the way, we got 4 more levels to take on and 4 more bosses to beat. Our next locations are an harsh excavation in the desert, an abandoned oil refinery. We return back to the shipping facility, but this time there seems to be elemental traps, and finally a mystic forest where you have to take out your enemies without being sighted. I'll also use this time to bring up the fact that we aren't the only ones with a revive mechanic. As I said before, our enemies have a diva of their own, and they'll randomly revive one of the bosses that we've been fighting this whole time, a Jean. She may revive bosses to full, but they come back with way lower defense. You do like triple the damage, it's fine. And now on to the final gameplay aspect I've yet to mention. What do you get for beating bosses in this game? Kieran doesn't get special talismans like Gunvolt's darts, or even special weapons like Copen. She's the true Zero of this series, so she gets special moves for defeating bosses. A ranged talisman shot, an anti-air-to-air command normal, an invincible charge slash, and a dedicated falling attack. Honestly, when it comes to basic combat, she feels the best in this series to me because of these additions. When it comes to combat, Gunvolt and Copen are more get the lock on and then you just purely focus on dodging while you let your auto attack do all the work. Kieran is that active attack style that I've been waiting for, and I've really enjoyed it. Now obviously our bosses escape with their treasures and they take over the media tower, you know that level all the way from the first game, and create the Sunrise Palace. A giant sandcastle that puts all the level gimmicks together as we run through and refight our previous bosses, and some special cameos. No real boss rush in this game, at least not for the story, but we have 3 more levels before our rematch with Zed, and let's end the story synopsis here. I went back and I saw the call out I made in Gunvolt 2 about this game having 3 playable characters, and I technically wasn't all that wrong if Gunvolt's just going to steal Copen's moves, but I was wrong. If we're just going to compare it to 2, they've sacrificed characters for levels, and that's not inherently a bad thing, but more so than making compromises, it feels like this game as a whole just kinda gave up on certain aspects of this series. Like always, let's start with the story. I feel like the only way for this plot to not rub you the wrong way is if you didn't care about anything that happened or anyone in the previous game, so you know, basically the writers themselves. So once again, our old characters are thrown into the trash, no one really has a character or has a character arc, there's way too much writing for the amount of nothing that's actually being said, and because they finally decided to stop being edgy, they also kinda come off as needlessly sappy. Now let's try to get to the bits of the story that I skipped or slightly glazed over because it's either a bunch of jokes or a plot contrivance. So first things first, the plot takes place decades in the future, so all of our old characters can be tossed aside and forgotten. It's vague, but even if it's just 2 decades later, Copen is now much too old to participate in this plot that revolves around teenagers. But hey, maybe he's turned himself into an internally youthful robot in this timeline too. Second, Gunvolt turns into a dog because jokes, I guess. If you actually look at his design, he seems to be modeled after the mythical beast Keating. You know what Kirin is probably named after. They take the form of this chimera-like deer-dragon hybrid, and I guess they stylize it as a dog this time. I've seen the Kirin be related to lightning before, and it's also related to the yellow dragon, which is just an offshoot of the four beasts, which is another reference that Gunvolt likes to make. And you know, background details like this are fine and fun, but you know, just like bosses being named after cars or being based off arcana, it's just kinda cute. There's nothing inherently bad here, but there's also not really much inherently good. Just some funny dog jokes from here and there. Speaking of Kirin herself, as a character, she's fine. A bit more snarky than Gunvolt, but just as bland as a character in introspection. It helps that the two of them have someone to play off each other like Copen and Lola, but her personality is only blustered by the fact that this is a more jokey tone in overall storytelling. The most interesting thing about her is that she doesn't kill her enemies, but that's set up by a starting level where she's investigating Sumeragi, a business partner where she can't kill anyone, and it just kinda keeps popping up sporadically in levels. Honestly, the first time through I thought she was at least killing the random mooks from the enemy country in the last half of the game. But as I said before, it mostly feels like a means to an end to fill out our home base of walking cliches. That also can be said for our rival harem of villainesses and their boss Zed. As for what this story is trying to say, it comes off kind of shallow the whole time. You have this organization, Shadow Yakumo, who literally comes out of nowhere saying that they are the ones who watch over Sumeragi and keep them in check. An organization that tried to put adepts, a minority, under a massive hypnotized slavery. The story then tries to sell us the fact that Sumeragi aren't all bad and they've changed because I don't know, they have an Amazon shipping plant, they removed fossil fuels for their country off the back of our imprisoned main character, once again helped cause our current issue in the first place, and then you have our antagonists Adams who have absolutely nothing to add themselves other than we will be the ones who will control everything because Sumeragi lied about having another world-ending monster. It's supposed to read as, if people work together, they'll eventually find the solution, but it comes off as, our problems will be solved one day. I don't know when, but maybe. They constantly talk about people being held responsible for their own actions, but just like real life, it's just a bunch of gaslighting and looking to the side for large corporations because they hold up our country's foundation. No one's responsible for anything, nothing changes, and if it did, the story doesn't have the decency to show us that without compromising itself. Again. And last but not least, this game completely throws away the secret ending of the last game. If you're the type of person that cares about some production info or behind the scene aspects, you might be able to connect certain little plot points or character details from the previous games to this one, but the fact that they can't put all of that out in the open is a crime in and of itself. If you're just going to throw away the secret ending of the last game, why should I care about anything that happens now? You can have a self-contained story and change the overarching plot as much as you want, but that takes a lot more detail and care than this game's writer cares to put in. The only real connection to the secret ending in the last game is a joke ending for beating the game on the hardest mode in this one. And honestly, that rubs me the wrong way. I've always said that I don't really care for these games' story, but that doesn't mean that they aren't super close to getting me to care. But after this, nah, it's over. If these games continue, it's 100% just gameplay. And speaking of gameplay, it threw away Gunvolt just like the story did. As I said before, he's pretty much a win button, a crutch to overcome the level design. It's not that bad of a mechanic because Gunvolt still has to worry about stays, hazards, and power usage. He takes damage, and even reckless attacking takes time away from your transformation. For all of that freedom, you still have to be cautious. The only problem is that it practically eradicated his gameplay style. These games are still point-based games at heart, but you won't be playing that way with Gunvolt. Gunvolt still gains points as he plays, but he's too strong so he hardly racks up anything. And the enemies are too spaced out for his normal playstyle to actually work, and his darts has been reduced to 3, so you can't even rack up a good bonus in the first place. At best, with the right image pulses, he just becomes a fun time attack style mode, and the game even recognizes that, but it feels a bit too far off from where we were before. The best way to play him is playing just like Kirin, and that's kind of boring. However, this game's saving grace is that Kirin is extremely fun to play as. She's basically everything I wanted Copen to be in X2, and it's helped by the special abilities she gains from fighting the bosses. Her stage play, however, at least for points, is managing to stay in the air as long as you can, racking up arc chains as far as you can. As compared to before, she attacks from a distance like Gunvolt, but her rhythm and movement is closer to Copen's. She's a bit more difficult to handle than him, but the game is generous in its score multipliers. This can be tracked by the idle songs that play on a timer this time around. The higher your chain combo, the more songs that will play, and the overlay will get fancier with higher song chaining. All that being said, this game handles score completely differently from the past games. No matter what difficulty you're playing on, you don't lose it by the number of times you're hit or for running into a checkpoint. When you take damage, your score becomes locked and you need to get more points to unlock it, and you rack up more points to your lock as you continue to take damage. This makes runs in this game less stressful and allows for more mistakes, but rewards consistency better than before and eases you into that pure perfection play. By the way, to get those harder difficulty levels, you just need to beat the main game. You get 2 extra difficulties like in the past games: demanding tasks, which lower your HP and change up boss attacks, and merciless tasks, which also locks you out of passive image pulses. You can still use your active ones, but they are limited to a single use per level. Anthem and checkpoints still work, so you can pretty much brute force your way through it till the end. Or at least until the final boss. As long as it's better than X2, it's good by me. These extra tasks also change up the image pulses you can get in the levels and gives you a guaranteed pull on your first completion. Speaking of image pulses, it's probably their best system yet, but it's still RNG based and the money situation is only slightly better. There isn't an image pulse that I feel that you would need in this game like Gunvolt 1 and 2, or X2 for that matter, but it does make getting the ones that you would want a bit more difficult than need be. It tells you which ones are in which level, but it's still RNG based, so who knows how many runs you need to do. And as stated before, you level them up with money, but with how this game is played, you're hardly ever touching the ground where it is. Why did they make automatically grabbing money an image pulse? That's a waste of a slot. And on the subject, I would have liked it if the game allowed us to make multiple custom layouts. I'd have liked at least 3 myself, 1 for grinding, 1 for score rankings, and 1 for boss fights. Its saving grace is that you can switch between them on the fly during gameplay, so it is nice if only a bit cumbersome. Now we can get onto the presentation and the game's overall aesthetic. I think these games keep looking better and better. I praise the X games on their background elements, but this time they really stepped up the game with their foreground as well. The water in the forge facility really stood out to me, or how some of the enemies break off into the foreground. It's nice to be in the futuristic cityscape again, and the level variety this time around is pretty nice, even if it gets a bit samey near the end. But the actual level design of enemies and hazards and how they mix them up from all of the previous levels beforehand really spices it up a bit. I was going to complain about a desert just being there, but then I found out about the Totori Desert. Not a real desert in Japan, and I don't even know if it was an inspiration, but I found out a fun fact, so that's good enough for me. The soundtrack is once again excellent with more idle songs for your listening pleasure, and they swap out every 1,000 kudos this time if you keep your score up. Honestly, to wrap everything up, as an overall package, I'd say that this may be my favorite game in the series in terms of how the game is designed. I do enjoy Ix's more streamlined approach that makes going for medals worth it, as compared to this game where tokens stop mattering the more you level up the pulses that you want. But there is something nice about having an actual difficulty slider to your health more than just focusing on score, but that's just a preference. I think this game is the best in the series at letting you play how you want to. The image pulse system with its active and passive abilities really blow everything else out of the water. As stated before, I can focus on score, attack, defense, or my personal favorite, style. And that can range for altered movement or just letting the music rock longer than normal. My only major complaint is that Gunvolt really isn't present in this game titled Gunvolt 3. I never switched to him if I didn't have to, and that only happened when I unlocked the harder modes or was in a boss fight. You know, as mentioned before, for style. But Kirin is so fun and has a playstyle I enjoy so much that I'm okay with it. But that doesn't really excuse what happened to our titular character, who's been benched for 6 years now? I don't really know what they'll do next with Gunvolt, if at all, but they ended it with the door wide open for anything to happen. Well, anything except for tying it back to the ending of Gunvolt 2, but who knows, this series now plays with the idea of alternate timelines in the main and spin-off canon, so who am I to say? But at the end of it all I can say is that if you've enjoyed Gunvolt up until now, you'll probably enjoy this game, maybe? Heck, if you've hated Gunvolt up until now, you still might enjoy it, so what do you say? Give it a shot. But don't expect a good story, I'm never letting that go. Until we meet again, mata ao until we meet again.